I'm very glad you're here, Meg. I'm not sure. Certainly the first in chat, for sure. Hello and welcome. Wherever you are, whatever the time is, it's obviously bedtime. And I'm obvious, and I'm glad that you're here. Especially glad you're here, little dude. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Alex. How are you this evening, or this morning, or this afternoon? Whatever it is there. But you're Meg. That's a win in and of itself. Always winning. Are you having a good evening, little dude? Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. You excited for the holiday? Got any big plans? Lots of sweets? Ooh, lights are pretty. I like seeing those. Anybody have the big, time displays with music and everything? It's that thing I hope I provide a little bit of in the darkness. Just a little bit of light to make the world a little bit better. That's my goal. Less than a candle's worth. I hope it's not too ambitious. Careful, we've got little ones in the chat there, Alex. You can remember those sweet nothings to me in a DM if you like. It is where you are, not where they are. One of my most dedicated fans posts up in his pillow fort and listens to me. Well, you have an open line to my DM, so you can whisper all those things directly into my ear. But today, we're going to do something a little bit new. I've done a dedication stream before for Sinjin's birthday, but this one is unprompted and unsolicited. This is a dedication to another Storytime streamer, and she's pretty awesome. She's had her struggles with things, but she's an inspiration to me. She's been doing this longer and has a bigger following, and kind of shows me that this can be done. And she happens to really love her cats. So, for the poem today, I'm going to dedicate it to Storytime Sunny and her cats, Maestro and Snockings. Not sure if she's here, but I hope she catches this on the recording if she's not. Hey Gecko, glad to have you here. So today for the poem to open with, we're going to read The Cat by Charles Baudelaire and translated by Mr. Roy Campbell. The cat. A fine, strong, gentle cat is prowling, as in his bedroom, in my brain. So soft his voice, so smooth its strain, that you can scarcely hear him meowling. But should he venture to complain, or scold, the voice is rich and deep, and thus he manages to keep the charm of his untroubled reign. This voice, which seems to purl and filter through my soul's inmost shady nook, fills me with poems like a book, and fortifies me like a filter. His voice can cure the direst pain, and it contains the rarest raptures, the deepest meanings which it captures. It needs no language to explain. There is no bow that can sweep that perfect instrument, my heart, or make more sumptuous music start from its most vibrant chord and deep. Then can the voice of this strange elf, this cat, bewitching and seraphic, subtly harmonious in his traffic, with all things else and with himself. So sweet a perfume seems to swim out of his fur both brown and bright. I nearly was embalmed one night, from only once caressing him. Familiar lar of where I say, He rules, presides, inspires, and teaches all things to which his empire reaches. Perhaps he is a god or fay. When to a cherished cat my gaze is magnet drawn and then returns, back to itself it there discerns with strange excitement and amaze. Deep down in my own self, the rays of living opals, torch-like gleams, and pallid fire of eyes it seems, that fixedly return my gaze. But I hope she appreciates it and makes their day a little bit better. But I was looking for a poem to read, and I came across that and thought of her, and so I had to read it for her as a dedication. I hope you all liked it too. Personally, I'm a dog person, I admit, so I would prefer my dog to any cat, but I definitely understand a beloved pet, and I definitely understand having a preference between the two. So I hope you all enjoyed it, cat person, dog person, or the strange folk who are neither. No judgment, it's just difficult for me to comprehend. In any case, for bedtime tonight we're reading Nicholas Nickleby, although apparently I need to update the follower count. Let me do that really quick. We've been picking up a couple new followers. We're mostly on track to reach our goal, I think. We're at 60 followers, which honestly is really exciting, given that this isn't even my second month streaming. It's been amazing so far. We also picked up another subscriber, although they have not joined the Discord, and so I do not know who it is amongst the Twitter followers, as the donations through Patreon, and in accordance with my not doxing policy, I'm not going to announce their name from Patreon. But you are appreciated. I greatly appreciate the support. Thank you so much for that. And I do hope you join the Discord and come connect with the other members of the community and hang out with us and spend time with us. Hello and welcome, Carol. How are you this fine day? I'm glad you rewatch it, Alex. By the way, have you checked out the YouTube and subscribed to that? There's some content on there that's not on the Twitch anymore, and I'll be adding other things to the YouTube that won't be on Twitch. Some more poetry readings, things of that sort. You're bored out of your mind. Well, hopefully we can help with that. I hope I can keep you at least somewhat entertained. After all, a bored vampire is a terrible thing. He's apt to begin biting. All right. Well, I hope everyone is well, and go ahead and dive in. Chapter 17 is where we were. We had just encountered the Kinnewigs, and oh, that's no good. Are you getting ill? I hope you don't have the pandemic, the plague, the curse, the COVID, however you wish to refer to it. Nasty stuff. I hear there's a new strain going around that's far more infectious. I'm hoping the vaccines work on that one too. Oh, that's no good. I hope she recovers. I know for most people, recovery is pretty steady, but there have been a lot of people who haven't. So my thoughts are with you. I hope they're well, or become well, I suppose. Mild symptoms are good. But we had met the Kinwigs and their 4 daughters. Or I suppose it was 5 daughters, but one was much younger. And had learned about Newman Nogg's abode. And the Nickleby and Smike had landed on his doorstep. And they were cautioned to wait for the return of Mr. Ralph Nickleby before they attempted to confront him or learn about his sister's situation. In chapter 17, we're going to... I'm glad you did, and I'm glad you're here. Hopefully you can... it isn't too painful listening. Okay, that's fair. I hope you feel better tomorrow. Rest well. I'm glad you popped in for a bit. So this chapter, we're switching over to find out what's been going on with Miss Nickleby, his sister. So chapter 17 follows the fortunes of Miss Nickleby. It was with a heavy heart and many sad forebodings, which no effort could banish, that Kate Nickleby, on the morning appointed for the commencement of her engagement with Madame Mantalini, left the city when its clocks yet wanted a quarter of an hour of 8, and threaded her way alone, amid the noise and bustle of the streets, toward the west end of London. At this early hour, many sickly girls, whose business, like that of the poor worm, is to produce, with patient toil, the finery that bedecks the thoughtless and luxurious, traverse our streets, making toward the scene of their daily labor, and catching, as if by stealth, in their hurried walk, the only gasp of wholesome air and glimpse of sunshine which cheer their monotonous existence during the long train of hours that make a working day. As she drew nigh to the more fashionable quarter of town, Kate marked many of this class as they passed by, hurrying like herself to their painful occupation, and saw, in their unhealthy looks and feeble gait, but too clear an evidence that her misgivings were not wholly groundless. She arrived at Madame Mantalini's some minutes before the appointed hour, and after walking a few times up and down, in the hope that some other female might arrive and spare her the embarrassment of stating her business to the servant, knocked timidly at the door, which, after some delay, was opened by the footman, who had been putting on his striped jacket as he came upstairs, and was now intent on fastening his apron. "Is Madame Mantalini in?" faltered Kate. "Not often out at this time, miss," replied the man in a tone which rendered "miss" something more offensive than "my dear." "Can I see her?" asked Kate. "Eh?" replied the man, holding the door in his hand, and honoring the inquirer with a stare and a broad grin. "Lord, no." "I came by her own appointment," said Kate. I am to be employed here." "Oh, you should run the workers' bell," said the footman, touching the handle of one in the doorpost. "Let me see, though, I forgot. Miss Nickleby, is it?" "Yes," replied Kate. "You're to walk upstairs, then, please," said the man. "Madame Mantalini wants to see you. This way. Take care of these things on the floor." Cautioning her in these terms not to trip over a heterogeneous litter, words are hard, pastry cook's trays, lamps, waiters full of glasses, and piles of rout seats which were strewn about the hall, plainly bespeaking a late party on the previous night, the man led the way to the second story and ushered Kate into a back room, communicating by folding doors with the apartment in which she had first seen the mistress of the establishment. "If you'll wait here a minute," said the man, "I'll tell her presently." Having made this promise with much affability, he retired and left Kate alone. There was not much to amuse in the room, of which the most attractive feature was a half-length portrait in oil of Mr. Mantalini, whom the artist had depicted scratching his head in an easy manner, and thus displaying to advantage a diamond ring, the gift of Madame Mantalini before her marriage. There was, however, the sound of voices and conversation in the next room, and as the conversation was loud and the partition thin, Kate could not help discovering that they belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Mantalini. "If you will be odiously, damnably, outrageously jealous, my soul," said Mr. Mantalini, "you will be very miserable, horrid, miserable, dimnition miserable." And then there was a sound as though Mr. Mantalini was sipping at his coffee. I am miserable, returned Madame Mantalini, evidently pouting. Then you are an ungrateful, unworthy, dimmed, unthankful little fairy, said Mr. Mantalini. I am not, returned Madame with a sob. Do not put itself out of humour, said Mr. Mantalini, breaking an egg. It is a petty, bewitching little dimmed countenance, and it should not be out of humour, for it spoils its loveliness, and makes it cross and gloomy like a frightful, naughty, dimmed hobgoblin. I am not to be brought round in that way always, rejoined Madame sulkily. It shall be brought round in any way it likes best, and not brought round at all if it likes that better, retorted Mr. Mantalini, with his egg spoon in his mouth. It's very easy to talk, said Mrs. Mantalini. Not so easy when one is eating a dimnition egg, replied Mr. Mantalini, for the yolk runs down the waistcoat, and the yolk of egg does not match any waistcoat but a yellow waistcoat, dim it. You were flirting with her during the whole night, said Madame Mantalini, apparently desirous to lead the conversation back to the point from which it had strayed. No, my life. You were, said Madame. I had my eye upon you all the time. Bless the little winking, twinkling eye. It was on me all the time, cried Mantalini, in a sort of lazy rapture. Oh, dim it. And I say once more, resumed Madame, that you ought not to waltz with anybody but your own wife, and I will not bear it, Mantalini, if I take poison first. She will not take poison and have horrid plans, will she? Said Mantalini, who, by the altered sound of his voice, seemed to have moved his chair and taken up his position nearer to his wife. She will not take poison, because she had a dimmed fine husband, who might have married 2 countesses and a dowager. 2 countesses, interposed Madame. You told me 1 before. 2, cried Mantalini, 2 dimmed fine women, real countesses and splendid fortunes, dim it. And why didn't you? Asked Madame playfully. Why didn't I? Replied her husband. Had I not seen at a morning concert the dimmedest little fascinator in all the world, and while that little fascinator is my wife, it may not all the countesses and dowagers of England be. Mr. Mantalini did not finish the sentence, but he gave Madame Mantalini a very loud kiss, which Madame Mantalini returned, after which there seemed to be some more kissing, mixed up with the progress of breakfast. He has a very strange way of speaking, at least as it's written. And what about the cash, my existence's jewel, said Mantalini, when these endearments ceased. How much have we in hand? Very little indeed, replied Madame. We must have some more, said Mantalini. We must have some discount out of old Nickleby to carry on the war with, dim it. You can't want any more just now, said Madame coaxingly. My life and soul, returned her husband. There is a horse for sale at Scrubb's, which it would be a sin and a crime to lose. Going, my senses' joy, for nothing. For nothing, cried Madame. I am glad of that. For actually nothing, replied Mantalini. 100 guineas down will buy him, mane and crest, and legs and tail, and all the dimmedest beauty. I will ride him in the park before the very chariots of the rejected countesses. The dimmed old dowager will faint with grief and rage. The other 2 will say, He is married. He has made away with himself. It is a dimmed thing. It is all up. They will hate each other dimnably, and wish you dead and buried. Ha ha, dim it. Madame Mantalini's prudence, if she had any, was not proof against these triumphal pictures. After a little jingling of keys, she observed that she would see what her desk contained, and rising for that purpose, opened the folding door and walked into the room where Kate was seated. Dear me, child, exclaimed Madame Mantalini, recoiling in surprise. How came you here? Child, cried Mantalini, hurrying in. How came... oh, dim it, how do you do? I've been waiting here some time, ma'am, said Kate, addressing Madame Mantalini. The servant must have forgotten to let you know that I was here, I think. You really must see to that man, said Madame, turning to her husband. He forgets everything. I will twist his dim nose off his countenance for leaving such a very pretty creature all alone by herself, said her husband. Mantalini, cried Madame, you forget yourself. I don't forget you, my soul, and never shall and never can, said Mantalini, kissing his wife's hand, and grimacing aside to Miss Nickleby, who turned away. Appeased by this compliment, the lady of the business took some papers from her desk, which she handed over to Mr. Mantalini, who received them with great delight. She then requested Kate to follow her, and after several feints on the part of Mr. Mantalini to attract the young lady's attention, they went away, leaving that gentleman extended at full length on the sofa, with his heels in the air and a newspaper in his hand. Madame Mantalini led the way down a flight of stairs and through a passage to a large room at the back of the premises, where were a number of young women employed in sewing, cutting out, making up, altering, and various other processes known only to those who are cunning in the arts of millinery and dressmaking. It was a close room with a skylight, and as dull and quiet as a room need be. On Madame Mantalini calling aloud for Miss Nag, a short, bustling, overdressed female, full of importance, presented herself, and all the young ladies, suspending their operations for the moment, whispered to each other sundry criticisms upon the make and texture of Miss Nickleby's dress, her complexion, cast of features, and personal appearance, with as much good breeding as could have been displayed by the very best society in a crowded ballroom. "Oh, Miss Nag," said Madame Mantalini, "this is the young person I spoke to you about." Miss Nag bestowed a reverential smile upon Madame Mantalini, which she dexterously transformed into a gracious one for Kate, and said that certainly, although it was a great deal of trouble to have young people who were wholly unused to the business, still, she was sure the young person would try to do her best, impressed with which conviction she, Miss Nag, felt an interest in her already. "I think that, for the present at all events, it would be better for Miss Nickleby to come into the showroom with you and try things on for people," said Madame Mantalini. "She will not be able for the present to be of much use in any other way, and her appearance will—" "Suit very well with mine, Madame Mantalini," interrupted Miss Nag. "So it will, and to be sure I might have known that you would not be long in finding that out, for you have so much taste in all those matters that really, as I often say to the young ladies, I do not know how, when, or where you could possibly have acquired all you know." "Miss Nickleby and I are quite a pair, Madame Mantalini, only I am a little darker than Miss Nickleby, and, I think my foot may be a little smaller. Miss Nickleby, I am sure, will not be offended at my saying that, when she hears that our family have always been celebrated for small feet ever since our family had feet at all. Indeed, I think. I had an uncle once, Madame Mantalini, who lived in Cheltenham, and had a most excellent business as a tobacconist, who had such small feet, they were no bigger than those which are usually joined to wooden legs, the most symmetrical feet, Madame Mantalini, that even you can imagine." "They must have had something of the appearance of club feet, Miss Nag," said Madame. "Well, now, that is so like you," returned Miss Nag. "Ha, ha, ha, ha! Of club feet, oh, very good. As I often remark to the young ladies, well, I must say, and I do not care who knows it, of all the ready humor I ever heard anywhere, and I have heard a good deal, for when my dear brother was alive, I kept house for him, Miss Nickleby. We had to supper once a week, 2 or 3 young men, highly celebrated in those days for their humor, Madame Mantalini. Of all the ready humor, I say to the young ladies, I ever heard, Madame Mantalini's is the most remarkable. It is so gentle, so sarcastic, and yet so good-natured, as I was observing to Miss Simmons only this morning, that how or when or by what means she acquired it is to me a mystery indeed." Here Miss Nag paused to take a breath, which apparently I need to do as well. Not that she was marvelously loquacious and marvelously deferential to Madame Mantalini, since these are facts which require no comment, but that every now and again she was accustomed, in the torrent of her discourse, to introduce a loud, shrill, clear the import and meaning of which was variously interpreted by her acquaintance, some holding that Miss Nag dealt in exaggeration and introduced the monosyllable when any fresh invention was in course of coinage in her brain. Others that when she wanted a word, she threw it in to gain time and prevent anybody else from striking into the conversation. It may be further remarked that Miss Nag still aimed at youth, although she had shot beyond it years ago, and that she was weak and vain, and one of those people who are best described by the axiom that you may trust them as far as you can see them, and no farther. "You'll take care that Miss Nickleby understands her hours and so forth," said Madame Mantalini, "and so I'll leave her here with you. You'll not forget my directions, Miss Nag." Miss Nag, of course, replied that to forget anything Madame Mantalini had directed was a moral impossibility, and that lady, dispensing a general good morning among her assistants, sailed away. "Charming creature, isn't she, Miss Nickleby?" said Miss Nag, rubbing her hands together. "I have seen very little of her," said Kate. "I hardly know yet." "Have you seen Mr. Mantalini?" inquired Miss Nag. "Yes, I have seen him twice." "Isn't he a charming creature?" "Indeed, he does not strike me as being so, by any means," replied Kate. "No, my dear," cried Miss Nag, elevating her hands. "Why, goodness gracious mercy, where's your taste? Such a fine, tall, full-whiskered, dashing, gentlemanly man, with such teeth and hair, and, well now, you do astonish me." "I dare say I am very foolish," replied Kate, laying aside her bonnet. "But as my opinion is of very little importance to him or anyone else, I do not regret having formed it, and shall be slow to change it, I think." "He is a very fine man, don't you think so?" asked one of the young ladies. "Indeed he may be, for anything I could say to the contrary," replied Kate. "And drives very beautiful horses, doesn't he?" inquired another. "I dare say he may, but I never saw them," answered Kate. "Never saw them," interposed Miss Nag. "Oh, well, there it is at once, you know. How can you possibly pronounce an opinion about a gentleman, if you don't see him as he turns out altogether?" There was so much of the world, even of the little world of the country girl, in this idea of the old milliner, that Kate, who was anxious for every reason to change the subject, made no further remark, and left Miss Nag in possession of the field. After a short silence, during which most of the young people made a closer inspection of Kate's appearance, and compared notes respecting it, one of them offered to help her off with her shawl, and the offer being accepted, inquired whether she did not find black very uncomfortable wear. "I do indeed," replied Kate, with a bitter sigh. "So dusty and hot," observed the same speaker, adjusting her dress for her. Kate might have said that mourning is sometimes the coldest wear which mortals can assume, that it not only chills the breasts of those it clothes, but extending its influence to summer friends, freezes up their sources of goodwill and kindness, and withering all the buds of promise they once so liberally put forth, leaves nothing but bared and rotten hearts exposed. There are few who have lost a friend or relative constituting in life their sole dependence, who have not keenly felt this chilling influence of their sable garb. She had felt it acutely, and feeling it at the moment, could not quite restrain her tears. "I am very sorry to have wounded you by my thoughtless speech," said her companion. "I did not think of it. You are in mourning for some near relation." "For my father," answered Kate. "For what relation, Miss Simmons?" asked Miss Nag in an audible voice. "Her father," replied the other softly. "Her father, eh?" said Miss Nag, without the slightest depression of her voice. "Ah, a long illness, Miss Simmons?" "Hush," replied the girl, "I don't know." "Our misfortune was very sudden," said Kate, turning away, "or I might, perhaps, at a time like this, be enabled to support it better." There had existed not a little desire in the room, according to invariable custom, when any new, young person came, to know who Kate was, and what she was, and all about her. But although it might have been very naturally increased by her appearance and emotion, the knowledge that it pained her to be questioned was sufficient to repress even this curiosity, and Miss Nag, finding it hopeless to attempt extracting any further particulars just then, reluctantly commanded silence, and bade the work proceed. In silence, then, the tasks were plied until 1:30, when a baked leg of mutton, with potatoes to correspond, were served in the kitchen. The meal over, and the young ladies having enjoyed the additional relaxation of washing their hands, the work began again, and was again performed in silence, until the noise of carriages rattling through the streets, and of loud double knocks at doors, gave token that the day's work of the more fortunate members of society was proceeding in its turn. One of these double knocks at Madame Mantalini's door announced the equipage of some great lady, or rather rich one, for there is occasionally a distinction between riches and greatness, who had come with her daughter to approve of some court dresses which had been a long time preparing, and upon whom Kate was deputed to wait, accompanied by Miss Nag, and officered, of course, by Madame Mantalini. Kate's part in the pageant was humble enough, her duties being limited to holding articles of costume until Miss Nag was ready to try them on, and now and then tying a string or fastening a hook and eye. She might, not unreasonably, have supposed herself beneath the reach of any arrogance or bad humor, but it happened that the lady and daughter were both out of temper that day, and the poor girl came in for her share of their revilings. She was awkward, her hands were cold, dirty, coarse. She could do nothing right. They wondered how Madame Mantalini could have such people about her, requested they might see some other young woman the next time they came, and so forth. So common an occurrence would be hardly deserving of mention, but for its effect. Kate shed many bitter tears when these people were gone, and felt, for the first time, humbled by her occupation. She had, it is true, quailed at the prospect of drudgery and hard service, but she had felt no degradation in working for her bread, until she found herself exposed to insolence and pride. Philosophy would have taught her that the degradation was on the side of those who had sunk so low as to display such passions habitually, and without cause, but she was too young for such consolation. And her honest feeling was hurt. May not the complaint that common people are above their station often take its rise in the fact of uncommon people being below theirs? In such scenes and occupations, the time wore on until 9 o'clock, when Kate, jaded and dispirited with the occurrences of the day, hastened from the confinement of the workroom to join her mother at the street corner and walk home, the more sadly from having to disguise her real feelings and feign to participate in all the sanguine visions of her companion. "Bless my soul, Kate," said Mrs. Nickleby, "I've been thinking all day what a delightful thing it would be for Madame Mantalini to take you into partnership. Such a likely thing, too, you know. Why, your poor dear papa's cousin's sister-in-law, a Miss Browndock, was taken into partnership by a lady that kept a school at Hammersmith, and made her fortune in no time at all. I forget, by the by, whether that Miss Browndock was the same lady that got the £10,000 prize in the lottery, but I think she was. Indeed, now I come to think of it, I am sure she was. Mantalini and Nickleby, how well it would sound! And if Nicholas has any good fortune, you might have Dr. Nickleby, the headmaster of Westminster School, living in the same street." "Dear Nicholas," cried Kate, taking from her reticule her brother's letter from Dotheboys Hall. "In all our misfortunes, how happy it makes me, mamma, to hear he is doing well, and to find him writing in such good spirits. It consoles me for all we may undergo, to think that he is comfortable and happy." Poor Kate! She little thought how weak her consolation was, and how soon she would be undeceived. Chapter 18. Miss Nag, after doting on Kate Nickleby for 3 whole days, makes up her mind to hate her for evermore. The causes which led Miss Nag to form this resolution. There are many lives of much pain, hardship, and suffering, which, having no stirring interest for any but those who lead them, are disregarded by persons who do not want thought or feeling, but who pamper their compassion and need high stimulants to rouse it. There are not a few among the disciples of charity who require, in their vocation, scarcely less excitement than the votaries of pleasure in theirs, and hence it is that diseased sympathy and compassion are every day expended on out-of-the-way objects, when only too many demands upon the legitimate exercise of the same virtues in a healthy state are constantly within the sight and hearing of the most unobservant person alive. In short, charity must have its romance, as the novelist or playwright must have his. A thief in fustian is a vulgar character, scarcely to be thought of by persons of refinement, but dress him in green velvet, with a high-crowned hat, and change the scene of his operations from a thickly peopled city to a mountain road, and you shall find in him the very soul of poetry and adventure. So it is with the one great cardinal virtue, which, properly nourished and exercised, leads to, if it does not necessarily include, all the others. It must have its romance, and the less of real, hard, struggling, workaday life there is in that romance, the better. The life to which poor Kate Nickleby was devoted, in consequence of the unforeseen train of circumstances already developed in this narrative, was a hard one. But lest the very dullness, unhealthy confinement, and bodily fatigue which made up its sum and substance should deprive it of any interest with the mass of the charitable and sympathetic, I would rather keep Miss Nickleby herself in view just now than chill them in the outset by a minute and lengthened description of the establishment presided over by Madame Mantalini. "Well, now, indeed, Madame Mantalini," said Miss Nag, as Kate was taking her weary way homewards on the very first night of her novitiate, "that Miss Nickleby is a very creditable young person. A very creditable young person indeed. Upon my word, Madame Mantalini, it does very extraordinary credit, even to your discrimination, that you should have found such a very excellent, very well-behaved, very unassuming young woman to assist in the fitting on. I have seen some young women, when they had the opportunity of displaying before their betters, behave in such a— oh dear, well, but you're always right, Madame Mantalini, always. And as I very often tell the young ladies, how you do contrive to be always right, when so many people are so very often wrong, is to me a mystery indeed." Beyond putting a very excellent client out of humor, Miss Nickleby has not done anything very remarkable today, that I am aware of at least, said Madame Mantalini in reply. "Oh dear," said Miss Nag, "but you must allow a great deal for inexperience, you know." "And youth?" inquired Madame. "Oh, I say nothing about that, Madame Mantalini," replied Miss Nag, reddening, "because if youth were any excuse, you wouldn't have—" "Quite so good a forewoman as I have, I suppose," suggested Madame. "Well, I never did know anybody like you, Madame Mantalini," rejoined Miss Nag most complacently. "And that's the fact, for you know what one's going to say before it has time to rise to one's lips. Oh, very good, ha ha ha." "For myself," observed Madame Mantalini, glancing with affected carelessness at her assistant, and laughing heartily in her sleeve, "I consider Miss Nickleby the most awkward girl I ever saw in my life." "Poor dear thing," said Miss Nag. "It's not her fault. If it was, we might hope to cure it. But as it's her misfortune, Madame Mantalini, why really, you know, as the man said about the blind horse, we ought to respect it." "Her uncle told me she had been considered pretty," remarked Madame Mantalini. "I think her one of the most ordinary girls I have ever met with." "Ordinary!" cried Miss Nag, with a countenance beaming delight. "And awkward! Well, all I can say is, Madame Mantalini, that I quite love the poor girl, and that if she's twice as indifferent-looking and twice as awkward as she is, I should be only so much the more her friend, and that's the truth of it." In fact, Miss Nag had conceived an incipient affection for Kate Nickleby, after witnessing her failure that morning, and this short conversation with her superior increased the favorable prepossession to a most surprising extent, which was the more remarkable, as when she first scanned that young lady's face and figure, she had entertained certain inward misgivings that they would never agree. "But now," said Miss Nag, glancing at the reflection of herself in a mirror at no great distance, "I love her, I quite love her, I declare I do." Of such a highly disinterested quality was this devoted friendship, and so superior was it to the little weaknesses of flattery or ill nature, that the kind-hearted Miss Nag candidly informed Kate Nickleby next day that she saw she would never do for the business, but that she need not give herself the slightest uneasiness on this account, for that she, Miss Nag, by increased exertions on her own part, would keep her as much as possible in the background, and that all she would have to do would be to remain perfectly quiet before company, and to shrink from attracting notice by every means in her power. This last suggestion was so much in accordance with the timid girl's own feelings and wishes, that she readily promised implicit reliance on the excellent spinster's advice, without questioning, or indeed bestowing a moment's reflection upon, the motives that dictated it. "I take quite a lively interest in you, my dear soul, upon my word," said Miss Nag. "A sister's interest, actually. It is the most singular circumstance I ever knew." Undoubtedly it was singular that if Miss Nag did feel a strong interest in Kate Nickleby, it should not rather have been the interest of a maiden aunt or grandmother, that being the conclusion to which the difference in their respective ages would have naturally tended, but Miss Nag wore clothes of a very youthful pattern, and perhaps her feelings took the same shape. "Bless you," said Miss Nag, bestowing a kiss upon Kate at the conclusion of the second day's work. "How very awkward you have been all day." "I fear your kind and open communication, which has rendered me more painfully conscious of my own defects, has not improved me," sighed Kate. "No, no, I dare say not," rejoined Miss Nag, in a most uncommon flow of good humor. "But how much better that you should know it at first, and so be able to go on, straight and comfortable. Which way are you walking, my love?" "Toward the city," replied Kate. "The city!" cried Miss Nag, regarding herself with great favor in the glass as she tied her bonnet. "Goodness gracious me! Now do you really live in the city?" "Is it so very unusual for anybody to live there?" asked Kate, half smiling. "I couldn't have believed it possible that any young woman could have lived there under any circumstances whatever for 3 days together," replied Miss Nag. "Reduced, I should say poor people," answered Kate, correcting herself hastily, for she was afraid of appearing proud, "must live where they can." "Ah, very true, so they must. Very proper indeed," rejoined Miss Nag, with that sort of half sigh, which, accompanied by 2 or 3 slight nods of the head, is pity's small change in general society. "And that's what I very often tell my brother, when our servants go away ill, one after another, and he thinks the back kitchen's rather too damp for him to sleep in. These sort of people, I tell him, are glad to sleep anywhere. Heaven suits the back to the burden. What a nice thing it is to think that it should be so, isn't it?" "Very," replied Kate. "I'll walk with you part of the way, my dear," said Miss Nag, "for you must go very near our house, and as it's quite dark, and our last servant went to the hospital a week ago with St. Anthony's fire in her face, I shall be glad of your company." Kate would have willingly excused herself from this flattering companionship, but Miss Nag, having adjusted her bonnet to her entire satisfaction, took her arm, which plainly showed how much she felt the compliment she was conferring, and they were in the street before she could say another word. "I fear," said Kate, hesitating, "that my mother, is waiting for me." "You needn't make the least apology, my dear," said Miss Nag, smiling sweetly as she spoke. "I dare say she is a very respectable old person, and I shall be quite pleased to know her." As poor Mrs. Nickleby was cooling, not her heels alone, but her limbs generally, at the street corner, Kate had no alternative but to make her known to Miss Nag, who, doing the last new carriage customer at second hand, acknowledged the introduction with condescending politeness. The 3 then walked away arm in arm, with Miss Nag in the middle, in a special state of amiability. "I have taken such a fancy to your daughter, Mrs. Nickleby, you can't think," said Miss Nag, after she had proceeded a little distance in dignified silence. "I'm delighted to hear it," said Miss Nickleby, "though it is nothing new to me, that even strangers should like Kate." Cried Miss Nag. "You will like her better when you know how good she is," said Mrs. Nickleby. "It is a great blessing to me, in my misfortunes, to have a child who knows neither pride nor vanity, and whose bringing up might very well have excused a little of both at first. You don't know what it is to lose a husband, Miss Nag." As Miss Nag had never yet known what it was to gain one, it followed, very nearly as a matter of course, that she didn't know what it was to lose one. So she said in some haste, "No, indeed I don't," and said it with an air intending to signify that she should like to catch herself marrying anybody. No, she knew better than that. "Kate has improved even in this little time, I have no doubt," said Mrs. Nickleby, glancing proudly at her daughter. "Oh, of course," said Miss Nag. "And will improve still more," added Miss Nickleby. "That she will, I'll be bound," replied Miss Nag, squeezing Kate's arm in her own to point the joke. Just a second, I'm going to take the hoodie off. The tea's got me a bit too warm. All right, that's better. Okay. She was always clever, said poor Mrs. Nickleby, brightening up. Always from a baby. I recollect when she was only 2 years and a half old, that a gentleman who used to visit very much at our house, Mr. Watkins, you know, Kate, my dear, that your poor papa went bail for, who afterwards ran away to the United States, and sent us a pair of snowshoes with such an affectionate letter that it made your poor dear father cry for a week. You remember the letter, in which he said that he was very sorry he couldn't repay the £50 just then, because his capital was all out at interest, and he was very busy making his fortune, but that he didn't forget you were his goddaughter, and he should take it very unkind if we didn't buy you a silver coral and put it down to his old account. Dear me, yes, my dear, how stupid you are, and spoke so affectionately of the old port wine that he used to drink a bottle and a half every time he came. You must remember, Kate. Yes, mamma, what of him? Why, that Mr. Watkins, my dear, said Mrs. Nickleby slowly, as if she were making a tremendous effort to recollect something of paramount importance. That Mr. Watkins, he wasn't any relation, Miss Nag will understand, to the Watkins who kept the old boar in the village, by the by. I don't remember whether it was the old boar or George the Third, but it was one of the two, I know, and it's much the same. That Mr. Watkins said, when you were only 2 years and a half old, that you were one of the most astonishing children he ever saw. He did indeed, Miss Nag, and he wasn't at all fond of children, and couldn't have had the slightest motive for doing it. I know it was he who said so, because I recollect, as well as if it were only yesterday, his borrowing £20 of her poor dear papa the very moment afterwards. Having quoted this extraordinary and most disinterested testimony to her daughter's excellence, Mrs. Nickleby stopped to breathe, and Miss Nag, finding that the discourse was turning upon family greatness, lost no time in striking in with a small reminiscence on her own account. Don't talk of lending money, Mrs. Nickleby, said Miss Nag, or you'll drive me crazy, perfectly crazy. My mamma was the most lovely and beautiful creature, with the most striking and the most exquisite nose that was ever put upon a human face. I do believe, Mrs. Nickleby, here Miss Nag rubbed her own nose sympathetically, the most delightful and accomplished woman, perhaps, that ever was seen, but she had that one failing of lending money, and carried it to such an extent that she lent, thousands of pounds, all her little fortunes, and what's more, Mrs. Nickleby, I don't think, if we were to live till the very end of time, that we should ever get them back again. I don't indeed. After concluding this effort of invention without being interrupted, Miss Nag fell into many more recollections, no less interesting than true, the full tide of which Mrs. Nickleby, in vain attempting to stem, at length sailed smoothly down by adding an undercurrent of her own recollections. And so both ladies went on talking together in perfect contentment, the only difference between them being that whereas Miss Nag addressed herself to Kate and talked very loud, Mrs. Nickleby kept on in one unbroken monotonous flow, perfectly satisfied to be talking and caring very little whether anybody listened or not. In this manner they walked on very amicably until they arrived at Miss Nag's brother's, who was an ornamental stationer and small circulating library keeper in a by-street off Tottenham Court Road, and who let out by the day, week, month, or year the newest old novels, whereof the titles were displayed in pen and ink characters on a sheet of pasteboard swinging at his doorpost. As Miss Nag happened at that moment to be in the middle of an account of her 22nd offer from a gentleman of large property, she insisted upon their all going in to supper together, and in they went. "Don't go away, Mortimer," said Miss Nag as they entered the shop. "It's only one of our young ladies and her mother, Mrs. and Miss Nickleby." "Oh, indeed," said Mr. Mortimer Nag. "Ah!" Having given utterance to these ejaculations with a very profound and thoughtful air, Mr. Nag slowly snuffed 2 kitchen candles on the counter and 2 more in the window, and then snuffed himself from a box in his waistcoat pocket. There was something very impressive in the ghostly air with which this was all done, and as Mr. Nag was a tall, lank gentleman of solemn features, wearing spectacles and garnished with much less hair than a gentleman bordering on 40 or thereabouts usually boasts. Mrs. Nickleby whispered her daughter that she thought he must be literary. "Past 10, said Mr. Nag, consulting his watch. "Thomas, close the warehouse." Thomas was a boy nearly half as tall as a shutter, and the warehouse was a shop about the size of 3 hackney coaches. "Ah," said Mr. Nag once more, heaving a deep sigh as he restored to its parent shelf the book he had been reading. "Well, yes, I believe supper is ready, sister." With another sigh, Mr. Nag took up the kitchen candles from the counter and preceded the ladies with mournful steps to a back parlor, where a charwoman, employed in the absence of the sick servant, and remunerated with certain 18 pences to be deducted from her wages due, was putting the supper out. "Mrs. Blockson," said Miss Nag, reproachfully, "how very often I have begged you not to come into the room with your bonnet on." "I can't help it, Miss Nag," said the charwoman, bridling up on the shortest notice. "There's been a deal of cleaning to do in this house, and if you don't like it, I must trouble you to look out for somebody else, for it don't hardly pay me, and that's the truth, if I was to be hung this minute." "I don't want any remarks, if you please," said Miss Nag, with a strong emphasis on the personal pronoun. "Is there any fire downstairs for some hot water presently?" "No, there is not indeed, Miss Nag," replied the substitute, "and so I won't tell you no stories about it." "Then why isn't there?" said Miss Nag. "Because there aren't no coals left out, and if I could make coals I would, but as I can't, I won't, and so I make bold to tell you, mem," replied Mrs. Blockson. "Will you hold your tongue, female?" said Mr. Mortimer Nag, plunging violently into this dialogue. "By your leave, Mr. Nag," retorted the charwoman, turning sharp round. "I'm only too glad not to speak in this house, excepting when and where I'm spoke to, sir. And with regard to being a female, sir, I should wish to know what you considered yourself." "A miserable wretch," exclaimed Mr. Nag, striking his forehead. "A miserable wretch." "I'm very glad to find that you don't call yourself out of your name, sir," said Mrs. Blockson. "And as I had 2 twin children the day before yesterday was only 7 weeks, and my little Charlie fell down an airy and put his elber out last Monday, I shall take it as a favor if you'll send 9 shillings for 1 week's work to my house afore the clock strikes 10 tomorrow." With these parting words, the good woman quitted the room with great ease of manner, leaving the door wide open. Mr. Nag, at the same moment, flung himself into the warehouse and groaned aloud. "What is the matter with that gentleman, pray?" inquired Mrs. Nickleby, greatly disturbed by the sound. "Is he ill?" inquired Kate, really alarmed. "Hush," replied Miss Nag, "a most melancholy history. He was once most devotedly attached to Madame Mantalini." "Bless me!" exclaimed Mrs. Nickleby. "Yes," continued Miss Nag, "and received great encouragement too, and confidently hoped to marry her. He has a most romantic heart, Mrs. Nickleby, as indeed all our family have, and the disappointment was a dreadful blow. He is a wonderfully accomplished man, most extraordinarily accomplished. Reads every novel that comes out. I mean every novel that has any fashion in it, of course. The fact is that he did find so much in the books he read applicable to his own misfortunes, and did find himself in every respect so much like the heroes, because of course he is conscious of his own superiority, as we all are, and very naturally, that he took to scorning everything and became a genius, and I am quite sure that he is, at this very present moment, writing another book." "Another book," repeated Kate, finding a pause that was left for somebody to say something. "Yes," said Miss Nag, nodding in great triumph. "Another book, in 3 volumes post-octavo. Of course, it's a great advantage to him, in all his little fashionable descriptions, to have the benefit of my experience, because, of course, few authors who write about such things can have such opportunities of knowing them as I have. He's so wrapped up in high life that the least allusion to business or worldly matters, like that woman just now, for instance, quite distracts him. But as I often say, I think his disappointment a great thing for him, because if he hadn't been disappointed, he couldn't have written about blighted hopes and all that. And the fact is, if it hadn't happened as it has, I don't believe his genius would ever have come out at all. How much more communicative Miss Nag might have become under more favorable circumstances, it is impossible to divine. But as the gloomy one was within earshot, and the fire wanted making up, her disclosures stopped here. To judge from all appearances, and the difficulty of making the water warm, the last servant could not have been much accustomed to any other fire than St. Anthony's. But a little brandy and water was made at last, and the guests, having been previously regaled with cold leg of mutton and bread and cheese, soon afterwards took leave. Kate, amusing herself all the way home with the recollection of her last glimpse of Mr. Mortimer Nag, deeply abstracted in the shop, and Mrs. Nickleby by debating within herself whether the dressmaking firm would ultimately become Mantalini, Nag, and Nickleby, or Mantalini, Nag, Nickleby, and Nag. At this high point, Miss Nag's friendship remained for 3 whole days, much to the wonderment of Madame Mantalini's young ladies, who had never beheld such constancy in that quarter before, but on the 4th it received a check no less violent than sudden, which thus occurred. It happened that an old lord of great family, who was going to marry a young lady of no family in particular, came with the young lady and the young lady's sister to witness the ceremony of trying on 2 nuptial bonnets which had been ordered the day before, and Madame Mantalini announcing the fact in a shrill treble through the speaking pipe, which communicated with the workroom, Miss Nag darted hastily upstairs with a bonnet in each hand, and presented herself in the showroom in a charming state of palpitation, intended to demonstrate her enthusiasm in the cause. The bonnets were no sooner fairly on than Miss Nag and Madame Mantalini fell into convulsions of admiration. "A most elegant appearance," said Madame Mantalini. "I never saw anything so exquisite in all my life," said Miss Nag. Now, the old lord, who was a very old lord, said nothing, but mumbled and chuckled in a state of great delight, no less with the nuptial bonnets and their wearers, than with his own address in getting such a fine woman for his wife. And the young lady, who was a very lively young lady, seeing the old lord in this rapturous condition, chased the old lord behind a cheval glass, and then and there kissed him, while Madame Mantalini and the other young lady looked discreetly away. But, pending the salutation, Miss Nag, who was tinged with curiosity, stepped accidentally behind the glass, and encountered the lively young lady's eye just at the very moment when she kissed the old lord, upon which the young lady, in a pouting manner, murmured something about an old thing and great impertinence, and finished by darting a look of displeasure at Miss Nag, and smiling contemptuously. "Madame Mantalini," said the young lady. "Ma'am," said Madame Mantalini, "pray have up that pretty young creature we saw yesterday." "Oh, yes, do," said the sister. "Of all things in the world, Madame Mantalini," said the lord's intended, throwing herself languidly on a sofa, "I hate being waited on by frights or elderly persons. Let me always see that young creature, I beg, whenever I come." "By all means," said the old lord. "The lovely young creature, by all means." "Everybody is talking about her," said the young lady, in the same careless manner, "and my lord, being a great admirer of beauty, must positively see her." "She is universally admired," replied Madame Mantalini. "Miss Nag, send up Miss Nickleby. You needn't return." I beg your pardon, Madame Mantalini. What did you say last?" asked Miss Nag, trembling. "You needn't return," repeated the superior, sharply. Miss Nag vanished without another word, and in all reasonable time was replaced by Kate, who took off the new bonnets and put on the old ones, blushing very much to find that the old lord and the 2 young ladies were staring her out of countenance all the time. "Why, how you color, child," said the lord's chosen bride. "She is not quite so accustomed to her business as she will be in a week or 2, interposed Madame Mantalini, with a gracious smile. "I am afraid you have been giving her some of your wicked looks, my lord," said the intended. "No, no, no," replied the old lord. "No, no, I'm going to be married, and lead a new life. Ha, ha, ha! A new life, ha, ha, ha!" It was a satisfactory thing to hear that the old gentleman was going to lead a new life, for it was pretty evident that his old one would not last him much longer. The mere exertion of protracted chuckling reduced him to a frightful ebb of coughing and gasping. It was some minutes before he could find breath to remark that the girl was too pretty for a milliner. I hope you don't think good looks a disqualification for the business, my lord, said Madame Mantalini, simpering. Not by any means, replied the old lord, or you would have left it long ago. You naughty creature, said the lively lady, poking the pier with her parasol. I won't have you talk so. How dare you? This playful inquiry was accompanied with another poke, and then the old lord caught the parasol and wouldn't give it up again, which induced the other lady to come to the rescue, and some very pretty sportiveness ensued. You will see that those little alterations are made, Madame Mantalini, said the lady. Nay, you bad man, you positively shall go first. I wouldn't leave you behind with that pretty girl, not for half a second. I know you too well. Jane, my dear, let him go first, and we shall be quite sure of him. The old lord, evidently much flattered by this suspicion, bestowed a grotesque leer upon Kate as he passed, and receiving another tap with the parasol for his wickedness, tottered downstairs to the door, where his sprightly body was hoisted into the carriage by two stout footmen. Faugh, said Madame Mantalini. How he ever gets into a carriage without thinking of a hearse, I can't think. There, take the things away, my dear. Take them away. Kate, who had remained during the whole scene with her eyes modestly fixed upon the ground, was only too happy to avail herself of the permission to retire, and hastened joyfully downstairs to Miss Nag's dominion. The circumstances of the little kingdom had greatly changed, however, during the short period of her absence. In place of Miss Nag being stationed in her accustomed seat, preserving all the dignity and greatness of Madame Mantalini's representative, that worthy soul was reposing on a large box, bathed in tears, while 3 or 4 of the young ladies in close attendance upon her, together with the presence of hartshorn, vinegar, and other restoratives, would have borne ample testimony, even without the derangement of the headdress and front row of curls, to her having fainted desperately. Bless me, said Kate, stepping hastily forward. What is the matter? This inquiry produced in Miss Nag violent symptoms of a relapse, and several young ladies, darting angry looks at Kate, applied more vinegar and hartshorn, and said it was a shame. What is a shame? Demanded Kate. What is the matter? What has happened? Tell me. Matter, cried Miss Nag, coming all at once bolt upright, to the great consternation of the assembled maidens. Matter! Fie upon you, you nasty creature! Gracious, cried Kate, almost paralyzed by the violence with which the adjective had been jerked out from between Miss Nag's closed teeth. Have I offended you? You offended me? Retorted Miss Nag. You? A chit, a child, an upstart nobody. Oh, indeed! Ha! Ha! Now it was evident, as Miss Nag laughed, that something struck her as being exceedingly funny, and as the young ladies took their tone from Miss Nag, she being the chief, they all got up a laugh without a moment's delay, and nodded their heads a little, and smiled sarcastically to each other, as much as to say how very good that was. Here she is, continued Miss Nag, getting off the box, and introducing Kate with much ceremony and many low curtsies to the delighted throng. Here she is. Everybody is talking about her. The belle, ladies. The beauty, oh, you bold-faced thing. At this crisis, Miss Nag was unable to repress a virtuous shudder, which immediately communicated itself to all the young ladies, after which Miss Nag laughed, and after that cried. For 15 years, exclaimed Miss Nag, sobbing in a most affecting manner, for 15 years have I been the credit and ornament of this room and the one upstairs. Thank God, said Miss Nag, stamping first her right foot and then her left with remarkable energy. I have never, in all that time, till now, been exposed to the arts, the vile arts of a creature who disgraces us with all her proceedings, and makes proper people blush for themselves. But I feel it, I do feel it, although I am disgusted. Miss Nag here relapsed into softness, and the young ladies, renewing their attentions, murmured that she ought to be superior to such things, and that for their part they despised them, and considered them beneath their notice, in witness whereof they called out, more emphatically than before, that it was a shame, and they felt so angry they did, They hardly knew what to do with themselves. "Have I lived to this day to be called a fright?" cried Miss Nag, suddenly becoming convulsive, and making an effort to tear her front off. "Oh, no, no," replied the chorus. "Pray don't say so. Don't now." "Have I deserved to be called an elderly person?" screamed Miss Nag, wrestling with the supernumeraries. "Don't think of such things, dear," answered the chorus. "I hate her," cried Miss Nag. "I detest and hate her. Never let her speak to me again. Never let anybody who is a friend of mine speak to her. A slut, a hussy, an impudent, artful hussy." Having denounced the object of her wrath in these terms, Miss Nag screamed once, hiccuped thrice, gurgled in her throat several times, slumbered, shivered, woke, came to, composed her headdress, and declared herself quite well again. So, quick obvious story. A year or two ago, my kid had quite the crush on this boy at her school. And for his part, he liked her quite a bit too. It was very cute. They'd sit together on school trips and eat lunch together and talk together all the time. It was quite adorable. But one day, this new girl to the school came and sat herself in the boy's lap right in front of my kid. And my kid was just shocked and appalled and didn't quite know how to handle it. And when she told me about it, indeed the scandal, when she told me about it, I was like, oh, let's see, what name shall we call her? How about Aubrey? Aubrey's a good name, right? None of you are named Aubrey, are you? And so I said, that isn't her name at all, by the way, not even remotely. And so I look at my kid and I'm like, well, the thing you should know about Aubrey, is she a hussy. And my kid just died. I have not seen her laugh that hard in a very long time. She absolutely loved it. And so ever since, whenever Aubrey comes up in conversation, I say, oh, she a hussy. I mean, she went and settled herself in the boy's lap with full intentions. And the point was more to get my kid out of her doldrums and depressions. She was quite jealous. They were teenagers. But it worked. I also informed her that she could never, ever say that to her face, or to her friends, or spread it about, or anything like that. But that it was only something between me and her. And she didn't do that. She's not prone to gossip and insult and that sort of thing. Exactly, private joke. But it made her feel better. And she since moved on from the boy. Which is good. He was, yeah. I mean, he was a good kid, don't get me wrong. But in any case, I thought you guys would find it funny, but if you want to judge me, that's okay too. Done is done, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it made her feel better, which is what was important to me. And it did no harm whatsoever. Sure. We can take our tea break. Well, I mean, do you really mind me reading a little extra? Let's see if 8 Ball agrees with me. quit popping your finners? What are you talking about? Well, it's official. 8-Ball says she a hussy. Oh my, what does your mother think of me? The scandal? The shame of it all. Oh. I hope everyone's enjoying the book and the story. And I hope everyone enjoyed the new author yesterday. It's official, your dog is not a hussy. Do you have grapes, though? I could go for some grapes. Yeah, I really enjoyed them. Oh. By the way, if you are enjoying the stories today or yesterday or any of them really, and you have not already followed, please do click that follow button. We're trying to go for 75 follows, but whether we make it or not, I still am very grateful for all of you that follow and show up and view and listen, support the stream. And we also have a Discord you can join and connect with the community, chat with me and with others, do book requests and that sort of thing. It's also where we do the subscriber stream on Thursdays, or the subscriber reading, I should say. And we read modern books there and stuff that's still under copyright because we're able to go under the book club carve out. Time to make more accounts. No, do not do that. I do not want any fake follows whatsoever. I want only real follows, please. And only if you're truly enjoying it. If you don't follow. Even if you're somebody that knows me outside or I've followed you or whatever. All right, let's check it out. Let's see what the book request was. The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. You know, one second, I might even have that on my shelf. Let me check real quick. All right, let's see. I've got a leather-bound collection of Aesop, Grimm, and Andersen. Let's see if the Snow Queen was in here. Okay, so no Snow Queen in this one, but I bet we can find it on Gutenberg. I would be happy to read that, though. Let's see what Gutenberg has. Here we are. I found it. Well, we can definitely read that for you, Panda. Not a problem. It wasn't too difficult. I'm a little bummed that it's not in my hardbound copy, but that's all right. Okay. Any more questions for 8 Ball before we dive back in? Anybody need a moment more to warm up their tea or coffee or cocoa or whatever? All right. Well, let's dive back into it then. The joys of a wireless headset. But I never ever run out of batteries with mine. I may occasionally spin in my chair or gesticulate with my arms and have the cable go flying as it's suddenly unplugged, but I never run out of batteries. Okay. So, we have learned, yes, occasionally. And if you try to insinuate that it's any more than occasionally, I shall deny it to my dying breath. I don't care if your comment is true or not. Doesn't matter, I'll still deny it. All right, so we found out that Kate's the hussy. Interesting. Poor Kate had regarded these proceedings, at first, in perfect bewilderment. She had then turned red and pale by turns, and once or twice essayed to speak, but as the true motives of this altered behavior developed themselves, she retired a few paces and looked calmly on without deigning a reply. Nevertheless, although she walked proudly to her seat and turned her back upon the group of little satellites who clustered round their ruling planet in the remotest corner of the room, she gave way in secret to some such bitter tears as would have gladdened Miss Nag's inmost soul if she could have seen them fall. Glad it's not my mic anymore. Well, this is a better mic, is it not? And that would have been the chapter end. If you guys would have let me read 30 more seconds, we would have been at the end of the chapter. Oh well. Chapter 19. Descriptive of a dinner at Mr. Ralph Nickleby's, and of the manner in which the company entertained themselves before dinner, at dinner, and after dinner. I'm guessing there's going to be a dinner. What do you guys think? I might be mistaken. The bile and rancor of the worthy Miss Nag, undergoing no diminution during the remainder of the week, but rather augmenting with every successive hour, and the honest ire of all the young ladies rising, or seeming to rise, in exact proportion to the good spinster's indignation, and both waxing very hot every time Miss Nickleby was called upstairs, it will be readily imagined that the young lady's daily life was none of the most cheerful or enviable kind. She hailed the arrival of Saturday night as a prisoner would a few delicious hours' respite from slow and wearing torture, and felt that the poor pittance for her first week's labor would have been dearly and hardly earned had its amount been troubled. When she joined her mother, as usual, at the street corner, she was not a little surprised to find her in a conversation with Mr. Ralph Nickleby, but her surprise was soon redoubled, no less by the matter of their conversation than by the smooth and altered manner of Mr. Nickleby himself. "Ah, my dear," said Ralph, "we were at that moment talking about you." "Indeed," replied Kate, shrinking, though she scarce knew why, from her uncle's cold, glistening eye. "That instant," said Ralph, "I was coming to call for you, making sure to catch you before you left. But your mother and I have been talking over family affairs, and the time has slipped away so rapidly." "Well, now hasn't it?" interposed Mrs. Nickleby, quite insensible to the sarcastic tone of Ralph's last remark. Upon my word, I couldn't have believed it possible that such a... Kate, my dear, you're to dine with your uncle at 6:30 tomorrow. Triumphing in having been the first to communicate this extraordinary intelligence, Mrs. Nickleby nodded and smiled a great many times to impress its full magnificence on Kate's wondering mind, and then flew off at an acute angle to a committee of ways and means. "Let me see," said the good lady. "Your black silk frock will be quite dress enough, my dear, with that pretty little scarf, and a plain band in your hair, and a pair of black silk stock—" "Dear, dear," cried Mrs. Nickleby, flying off at another angle. "If I had but those unfortunate amethysts of mine. You recollect them, Kate, my love, how they used to sparkle, you know. But your papa, dear papa, there was never anything so cruelly sacrificed as those jewels were. Never." Overpowered by this agonizing thought, Mrs. Nickleby shook her head in a melancholy manner, and applied her handkerchief to her eyes. "I don't want them, mamma, indeed," said Kate. "Forget that you ever had them." "Lord, Kate, my dear," rejoined Mrs. Nickleby pettishly, "how like a child you talk. 24 silver teaspoons, brother-in-law, 2 gravies, 4 salts, all the amethysts, necklace, brooch, and earrings, all made away with at the same time, and I saying almost on my bended knees to that poor good soul, 'Why don't you do something, Nicholas? Why don't you make some arrangement?' I am sure that anybody who was about us at that time will do me the justice to own that if I said that once, I said it 50 times a day. Didn't I, Kate, my dear? Did I ever lose an opportunity of impressing it on your poor papa?" "No, no, mamma, never," replied Kate. And to do Mrs. Nickleby justice, she never had lost, and to do married ladies as a body justice, they seldom do lose, any occasion of inculcating similar golden precepts, whose only blemish is the slight degree of vagueness and uncertainty in which they are usually enveloped. "Ah," said Mrs. Nickleby, with great fervor, "if my advice had been taken at the beginning, well, I have always done my duty, and that's some comfort." When she had arrived at this reflection, Mrs. Nickleby sighed, rubbed her hands, cast up her eyes, and finally assumed a look of meek composure, thus importing that she was a persecuted saint, but that she wouldn't trouble her hearers by mentioning a circumstance which must be so obvious to everybody. "Now," said Ralph with a smile, which, in common with all other tokens of emotion, seemed to skulk under his face, rather than play boldly over it. "To return to the point from which we have strayed, I have a little party of gentlemen with whom I am connected in business just now, at my house tomorrow, and your mother has promised that you shall keep house for me. I am not much used to parties, but this is one of business, and such fooleries are an important part of it sometimes. You don't mind obliging me?" "Mind!" cried Mrs. Nickleby. "My dear Kate, why—" "Pray," interrupted Ralph, motioning her to be silent, "I spoke to my niece." "I shall be very glad, of course, uncle," replied Kate, "but I am afraid you will find me awkward and embarrassed." "Oh, no," said Ralph. "Come when you like, in a hackney coach. I'll pay for it. Good night. God bless you." The blessing seemed to stick in Mr. Ralph Nickleby's throat, as if it were not used to the thoroughfare, and didn't know the way out. But it got out somehow, though awkwardly enough, and having disposed of it, he shook hands with his 2 relatives, and abruptly left them. "What a very strongly marked countenance your uncle has," said Mrs. Nickleby, quite struck with his parting look. "I don't see the slightest resemblance to his poor brother." Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. I didn't think you guys wanted to hear that on the stream. "Mamma," said Kate reprovingly, "to think of such a thing." "No," said Mrs. Nickleby, musing, "there certainly is none, but it's a very honest face." The worthy matron made this remark with great emphasis and elocution, as if it comprised no small quantity of ingenuity and research, and in truth it was not unworthy of being classed among the most extraordinary discoveries of the age. Kate looked up hastily, and as hastily looked down again. "What has come over you, my dear, in the name of goodness?" asked Mrs. Nickleby, when they had walked on for some time in silence. I was only thinking, Mamma, answered Kate. Thinking, repeated Mrs. Nickleby. Aye, and indeed plenty to think about, too. Your uncle has taken a strong fancy to you, that's quite clear. And if some extraordinary good fortune doesn't come to you after this, I shall be a little surprised. That's all. With this, she launched out into sundry anecdotes of young ladies who had had £1,000 notes given them in reticules by eccentric uncles, and of young ladies who had accidentally met amiable gentlemen of enormous wealth at their uncles' houses, and married them after short but ardent courtships. And Kate, listening first in apathy, and afterwards in amusement, felt as they walked home something of her mother's sanguine complexion gradually awakening in her own bosom, and began to think that her prospects might be brightening, and that better days might be dawning upon them. Such is hope, heaven's own gift to struggling mortals, pervading, like some subtle essence from the skies, all things, both good and bad, as universal as death, and more infectious than disease. The feeble winter sun, and winter suns in the city are very feeble indeed, might have brightened up, as he shone through the dim windows of the large old house, on witnessing the unusual sight which one half-furnished room displayed. In a gloomy corner, where for years had stood a silent, dusty pile of merchandise, sheltering its colony of mice, and frowning, a dull and lifeless mass, upon the paneled room, save when, responding to the roll of heavy wagons in the street without, it quaked with sturdy tremblings, and caused the bright eyes of its tiny citizens to grow brighter still with fear, and struck them motionless, with attentive ear and palpitating heart, until the alarm had passed away. In this dark corner was arranged, with scrupulous care, all Kate's little finery for the day, each article of dress partaking of that indescribable air of jauntiness and individuality with which empty garments, whether by association or that they become molded, as it were, to the owner's form, will take, in eyes accustomed to or picturing the wearer's smartness. In place of a bale of musty goods, there lay the black silk dress, the neatest possible figure in itself. The small shoes with toes delicately turned out stood upon the very pressure of some old iron weight, and a pile of harsh discolored leather had unconsciously given place to the very same little pair of black silk stockings which had been the objects of Mrs. Nickleby's peculiar care. Rats and mice in such small gear had long ago been starved or had emigrated to better quarters, and in their stead appeared gloves, bands, scarfs, hairpins, and many other little devices, almost ingenious in their way as rats and mice themselves, for the tantalization of mankind. About and among them all moved Kate herself, not the least beautiful or unwonted relief to the stern, old, gloomy building. In good time or in bad time, as the reader likes to take it, for Mrs. Nickleby's impatience went a great deal faster than the clocks at that end of town, and Kate was dressed to the very last hairpin for a full hour and a half before it was at all necessary to begin to think about it. In good time or in bad time, the toilet was completed, and it being at length the hour agreed upon for starting, the milkman fetched a coach from the nearest stand, and Kate, with many adieux to her mother, and many kind messages to Miss La Creevy, who was come to tea, seated herself in it, and went away in state, if ever anybody went away in state in a hackney coach yet. And the coach and the coachman and the horses rattled and jangled and whipped and cursed and swore and tumbled on together until they came to Golden Square. The coachman gave a tremendous double knock at the door, which was opened long before he had done, as quickly as if there had been a man behind it, with his hand tied to the latch. Kate, who had expected no more uncommon appearance than Newman Noggs in a clean shirt, was not a little astonished to see that the opener was a man in handsome livery, and that there were 2 or 3 others in the hall. There was no doubt about it being the right house, however, for there was the name upon the door. So she accepted the laced coat sleeve which was tendered her, and entering the house, was ushered upstairs into a back drawing-room, where she was left alone. If she had been surprised at the apparition of the footman, she was perfectly absorbed in amazement at the richness and splendor of the furniture. The softest and most elegant carpets, the most exquisite pictures, the costliest mirrors, articles of richest ornament, quite dazzling from their beauty and perplexing from their prodigality with which they were scattered around, encountered her on every side. The very staircase nearly down to the hall door was crammed with beautiful and luxurious things, as though the house were brimful of riches, which, with a very trifling addition, would fairly run over into the street. Presently she heard a series of loud double knocks at the street door, and after every knock, some new voice in the next room. The tones of Mr. Ralph Nickleby were easily distinguishable at first, but by degrees they merged into the general buzz of conversation, and all she could ascertain was that there were several gentlemen with no very musical voices, who talked very loud, laughed very heartily, and swore more than she would have thought quite necessary. But this was a question of taste. At length the door opened, and Ralph himself, divested of his boots and ceremoniously embellished with black silks and shoes, presented his crafty face. "I couldn't see you before, my dear," he said in a low tone, and pointing as he spoke to the next room. "I was engaged in receiving them. Now, shall I take you in?" "Pray, uncle," said Kate, a little flurried, as people much more conversant with society often are when they are about to enter a room full of strangers, and have had time to think of it previously. "Are there any ladies here?" "No," said Ralph shortly. "I don't know any." Must I go in immediately?" asked Kate, drawing back a little. "As you please," said Ralph, shrugging his shoulders. "They are all come, and dinner will be announced directly afterwards. That's all." Kate would have entreated a few minutes' respite, but, reflecting that her uncle might consider the payment of the hackney coach fare a sort of bargain for her punctuality, she suffered him to draw her arm through his, and to lead her away. 7 or 8 gentlemen were standing round the fire when they went in, and as they were talking very loud, were not aware of their entrance until Mr. Ralph Nickleby, touching one on the coat sleeve, said in a harsh, emphatic voice, as if to attract general attention, "Lord Frederick Verisopht, my niece, Miss Nickleby." The group dispersed, as if in great surprise, and the gentleman addressed, turning round, exhibited a suit of clothes of the most superlative cut, a pair of whiskers of similar quality, a moustache, a head of hair, and a young face. "Eh?" said the gentleman. "What the devil?" With which broken ejaculations he fixed his glass in his eye, and stared at Miss Nickleby in great surprise. "My niece, my lord," said Ralph. "Then my ears did not deceive me, and it's not waxwork," said his lordship. "Yes, it's written like that. They really wrote wax like that. How do you do? I'm very happy." And then his lordship turned to another superlative gentleman, something older, something stouter, something redder in the face, and something longer upon town, and said in a loud whisper that the girl was devilish pretty. "Introduce me, Nickleby," said the second gentleman, who was lounging with his back to the fire and both elbows on the chimney-piece. "Sir Mulberry Hawk," said Ralph. "Otherwise the most knowing card in the pack, Miss Nickleby." Why did they write it like that? "Miss Nickleby," said Lord Frederick Verisopht. "Don't leave me out, Nickleby," cried a sharp-faced gentleman. I swear if they do it one more time, I'm not reading it like that. Who was sitting on a low chair with a high back, reading the paper. "Mr. Pike," said Ralph. "Nor me, Nickleby," cried a gentleman with a flushed face and a flash air, from the elbow of Sir Mulberry Hawk. "Mr. Pluck," said Ralph. Then wheeling about again, toward a gentleman with the neck of a stork and the legs of no animal in particular, Ralph introduced him as the Honorable Mr. Snob, and a white-headed person at the table as Colonel Chowser. The colonel was in conversation with somebody, who appeared to be a make-weight, and was not introduced at all. There were 2 circumstances which, in this early stage of the party, struck home to Kate's bosom, and brought the blood tingling to her face. One was the flippant contempt with which the guests evidently regarded her uncle, and the other, the easy insolence of their manner towards herself. That the first symptom was very likely to lead to the aggravation of the second, it needed no great penetration to foresee. And here Mr. Ralph Nickleby had reckoned without his host, for however fresh from the country a young lady by nature may be, and however unacquainted with conventional behavior, the chances are that she will have quite as strong an innate sense of decencies and proprieties of life as if she had run the gauntlet of a dozen London seasons, possibly a stronger one, for such senses have been known to blunt in this improving process. When Ralph had completed the ceremonial of introduction, he led his blushing niece to a seat. As he did so, he glanced warily round, as though to assure himself of the impression which her unlooked-for appearance had created. "An unexpected pleasure, Nickleby," said Lord Frederick Verisopht, taking his glass out of his right eye, where it had, until now, done duty on Kate, and fixing it in his left to bring it to bear on Ralph. "Designed to surprise you, Lord Frederick," said Mr. Pluck. "Not a bad idea," said his lordship, "and one that would almost warrant the addition of an extra 2.5%. "Nickleby," said Sir Mulberry Hawk, in a thick, coarse voice, "take the hint, and tack it on the other 25, or whatever it is, and give me half for the advice." Sir Mulberry garnished the speech with a hoarse laugh, and terminated it with a pleasant oath regarding Mr. Nickleby's limbs, whereat Messrs. Pike and Pluck laughed consumedly. These gentlemen had not quite recovered the jest when dinner was announced, and then they were thrown into fresh ecstasies by a similar cause, for Sir Mulberry Hawk, in an excess of humour, shot dexterously past Lord Frederick Verisopht, who was about to lead Kate downstairs, and drew her arm through his up to the elbow. So he's pimping out his niece, basically. "No, damn it, Verisopht," said Sir Mulberry. "Fair play's a jewel, and Miss Nickleby and I settled the matter with our eyes 10 minutes ago." "Ha, ha, ha," laughed the Honourable Mr. Snob. "Very good, very good." Rendered additionally witty by this applause, Sir Mulberry Hawk leered upon his friends most facetiously, and led Kate downstairs with an air of familiarity, which roused in her gentle breast such burning indignation as she felt it almost impossible to repress. Nor was the intensity of these feelings at all diminished when she found herself placed at the top of the table, with Sir Mulberry Hawk and Lord Frederick Verisopht on either side. "Oh, so you've found your way into our neighbourhood, have you?" said Sir Mulberry, as his lordship sat down. "Of course," replied Lord Frederick, fixing his eyes on Miss Nickleby. "How can you—" "I'm not reading it like that. How can you ask me?" "Well, you attend to your dinner," said Sir Mulberry, "and don't mind Miss Nickleby and me, for we shall prove very indifferent company, I dare say." "I wish you'd interfere here, Nickleby," said Lord Frederick. "What is the matter, my lord?" demanded Ralph from the bottom of the table, where he was supported by Messrs. Pike and Pluck. "This fellow Hawk is monopolizing your niece," said Lord Frederick. "He has a tolerable share of everything that you lay claim to, my lord," said Ralph with a sneer. "Gad, so he has," replied the young man. "Devil take me if I know which is master in my house, he or I." "I know," muttered Ralph. "I think I shall cut him off with a shilling," said the young nobleman jocosely. "No, no, curse it," said Sir Mulberry. "When you come to the shilling, the last shilling, I'll cut you fast enough. But till then, I'll never leave you. You may take your oath of it." This sally, which was strictly founded on fact, was received with a general roar, above which was plainly distinguishable the laughter of Mr. Pike and Mr. Pluck, who were evidently Sir Mulberry's toads in ordinary. Indeed, it was not difficult to see that the majority of the company preyed upon the unfortunate young lord, who, weak and silly as he was, appeared by far the least vicious of the party. Sir Mulberry Hawk was remarkable for his tact in ruining, by himself and his creatures, young gentlemen of fortune, a genteel and elegant profession, of which he had undoubtedly gained the head. With all the boldness of an original genius, he had struck out an entirely new course of treatment, quite opposed to the usual method, his custom being, when he had gained the ascendancy over those he took in hand, rather to keep them down than to give them their own way, and to exercise his vivacity upon them openly and without reserve. Thus he made them butts in a double sense, and while he emptied them with great address, caused them to ring with sundry well-administered taps for the diversion of society. The dinner was as remarkable for the splendor and completeness of its appointments as the mansion itself, and the company were remarkable for doing it ample justice, in which respect Messrs. Pike and Pluck particularly signalized themselves. These two gentlemen eating of every dish and drinking of every bottle with a capacity and perseverance truly astonishing. They were remarkably fresh, too, notwithstanding their great exertions, for on the appearance of the dessert, they broke out again, as if nothing serious had taken place since breakfast. So they pigged out. Well, said Lord Frederick, sipping his first glass of port, if this is a discounting dinner, all I have to say is, devil take me, it wouldn't be a good plan to get a discount every day. They wrote it that way again, for plan. You'll have plenty of it in your time, returned Sir Mulberry Hawk. Nickleby will tell you that. What do you say, Nickleby? Inquired the young man. Am I to be a good customer? It depends entirely on circumstances, my lord, replied Ralph. On your lordship's circumstances, interposed Colonel Chowser of the militia, and the racecourses. The gallant colonel glanced at Messrs. Pike and Pluck, as if he thought they ought to laugh at his joke. But those gentlemen, being only engaged to laugh for Sir Mulberry Hawk, were, to his signal discomfiture, as grave as a pair of undertakers. To add to his defeat, Sir Mulberry, considering any such efforts an invasion of his peculiar privilege, eyed the offender steadily through his glass as if astonished at his presumption, and audibly stated his impression that it was an infernal liberty, which, being a hint to Lord Frederick, he put up his glass and surveyed the object of censure, as if he were some extraordinary wild animal, then exhibiting for the first time. As a matter of course, Messrs. Pike and Pluck stared at the individual whom Sir Mulberry Hawk stared at. So the poor colonel, to hide his confusion, was reduced to the necessity of holding his port before his right eye, and affecting to scrutinize its color with the most lively interest. All this while, Kate had sat as silently as she could, scarcely daring to raise her eyes, lest they should encounter the admiring gaze of Lord Frederick Verisopht, or, what was still more embarrassing, the bold looks of his friend Sir Mulberry. The latter gentleman was obliging enough to direct general attention toward her. Here is Miss Nickleby, observed Sir Mulberry, wondering why the deuce somebody doesn't make love to her. Okay. No, indeed, said Kate, looking hastily up. And then she stopped, feeling it would have been better to have said nothing at all. I'll hold any man 50 pounds, said Sir Mulberry, that Miss Nickleby can't look in my face and tell me she wasn't thinking so. Done, cried the noble gull. Within 10 minutes. Done, responded Sir Mulberry. The money was produced on both sides, and the Honourable Mr. Snob was elected to the double office of stakeholder and timekeeper. Hey, Sonny, glad you could make it. How are you? Very sleepy? Is that because it's obviously bedtime? Not too bad. Were you here at the beginning of the stream? Okay. Well, so I've been reading a poem at the beginning of every stream for a little bit now, and I found a poem that I dedicated to you and Maestro and Snockings. It was The Cat by Charles Baudelaire, as translated by Ray Campbell. So I hope you like it. But I called you out and dedicated it to you. All right, so they were making sport of Kate in a very, very impolite manner. Pray, said Kate in great confusion, while these preliminaries were in course of completion, pray do not make me the subject of any bets. Uncle, I cannot really. Why not, my dear, replied Ralph, in whose grating voice, however, there was an unusual huskiness, as though he spoke unwillingly, and would rather that the proposition had not been broached. It is done in a moment. There is nothing in it. If the gentlemen insist on it. I don't insist on it, said Sir Mulberry with a loud laugh. That is, I by no means insist upon Miss Nickleby's making the denial, for if she does, I lose. But I shall be glad to see her bright eyes, especially as she favors the mahogany so much. So she does, and it's too... Again, I don't know why they're writing it like this. And it's too bad of you, Miss Nickleby, said the noble youth. Quite cruel, said Mr. Pike. Horrid cruel, said Mr. Pluck. I don't care if I do lose, said Sir Mulberry, for one tolerable look at Miss Nickleby's eyes is worth double the money. More, said Mr. Pike. Far more, said Mr. Pluck. How goes the enemy snobs? Asked Sir Mulberry Hawk. 4 minutes gone. Bravo! Won't you make one effort for me, Miss Nickleby? Asked Lord Frederick after a short interval. You needn't trouble yourself to inquire, my buck, said Sir Mulberry. Miss Nickleby and I understand each other. She declares on my side and shows her taste. You haven't a chance, old fellow. Time, Snob? 8 minutes gone. Get the money ready, said Sir Mulberry. You'll soon hand over. Ha, 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 laughed Mr. Pike. Mr. Pluck, who always came second, topped his companion if he could, streamed outright. Weird vibes? What weird vibes? That they're basically trying to buy her in front of her uncle? I mean, that is what pimping out means. It's disgusting all the way around, really. I mean, family ought to mean something, even if decency doesn't. The poor girl, who was so overwhelmed with confusion that she scarcely knew what she did, had determined to remain perfectly quiet, but fearing that by so doing she might seem to countenance Sir Mulberry's boast, which had been uttered with great coarseness and vulgarity of manner, raised her eyes and looked him in the face. There was something so odious, so insolent, so repulsive in the look which met her, that without the power to stammer forth a syllable, she rose and hurried from the room. She restrained her tears by a great effort until she was alone upstairs, and then gave them vent. Capital, said Sir Mulberry Hawk, putting the stakes in his pocket. That's a girl of spirit, and we'll drink her health. It is needless to say that Pike & Co. responded with great warmth of manner to this proposal, or that the toast was drunk with many little insinuations from the firm, relative to the completeness of Sir Mulberry's conquest. Ralph, who, while the attention of the other guests was attracted to the principals in the preceding scene, had eyed them like a wolf, appeared to breathe more freely now his niece was gone. The decanters passing quickly round, he leaned back in his chair, and turned his eyes from speaker to speaker as they warmed with wine, with looks that seemed to search their hearts and lay bare, for his distempered sport, every idle thought within them. Meanwhile, Kate, left wholly to herself, had in some degree recovered her composure. She had learnt from a female attendant that her uncle wished to see her before she left, and had also gleaned the satisfactory intelligence that the gentleman would take coffee at table. The prospect of seeing them no more contributed greatly to calm her agitation, and taking up a book, she composed herself to read. She started sometimes when the sudden opening of the dining-room door let loose a wild shout of noisy revelry, and more than once rose in great alarm as a fancied footstep on the staircase impressed her with the fear that some stray member of the party was returning alone. Nothing occurring, however, to realize her apprehensions, she endeavored to fix her attention more closely on her book, in which by degrees she became so much interested that she had read on through several chapters without heed of time or place, when she was terrified by suddenly hearing her name pronounced by a man's voice close at her ear. The book fell from her hand. Lounging on an ottoman close by her was Sir Mulberry Hawk, evidently the worse. If a man be a ruffian at heart, he is never the better for wine. What a delightful studiousness, said this accomplished gentleman. Was it real now, or only to display the eyelashes? Kate, looking anxiously toward the door, made no reply. I have looked at 'em for 5 minutes, said Sir Mulberry. Upon my soul, they're perfect. Why did I speak and destroy such a pretty little picture? Do me the favor to be silent now, sir, replied Kate. No, don't, said Sir Mulberry, folding his crushed hat to lay his elbow on, and bringing himself still closer to the young lady. "Upon my life, you oughtn't to. Such a devoted slave of yours, Miss Nickleby. It's an infernal thing to treat him so harshly. Upon my soul it is." "I wish you to understand, sir," said Kate, trembling in spite of herself, but speaking with great indignation, "that your behavior offends and disgusts me. If you have a spark of gentlemanly feeling remaining, you will leave me." "Now why," said Sir Mulberry, "why will you keep up this appearance of excessive rigor, my sweet creature? Now, be more natural, my dear Miss Nickleby, be more natural, do." Kate hastily rose, but as she rose, Sir Mulberry caught her dress and forcibly detained her. "Let me go, sir," she cried, her heart swelling with anger. "Do you hear? Instantly, this moment." Sit down, said Sir Mulberry. "I want to talk to you." "Unhand me, sir, this instant," cried Kate. "Not for the world," rejoined Sir Mulberry. Thus speaking, he leaned over, as if to replace her in her chair. But the young lady, making a violent effort to disengage herself, he lost his balance and measured his length upon the ground. As Kate sprung forward to leave the room, Mr. Ralph Nickleby appeared in the doorway and confronted her. "What is this?" asked Ralph. "It is this, sir," replied Kate, violently agitated, "that beneath the roof where I, a helpless girl, your dead brother's child, should have most found protection, I have been exposed to insult which should make you shrink to look upon me. Let me pass you." Ralph did shrink, as the indignant girl fixed her kindling eye upon him, but he did not comply with her injunction nevertheless, for he led her to a distant seat, and returning and approaching Sir Mulberry Hawk, who had by this time risen, motioned toward the door. "Your way lies there, sir," said Ralph, in a suppressed voice that some devil might have owned with pride. "What do you mean by that?" demanded his friend fiercely. The swollen veins stood out like sinews on Ralph's wrinkled forehead, and the nerves about his mouth worked as though some unendurable emotion wrung them. But he smiled disdainfully, and again pointed to the door. "Do you know me, you old madman?" asked Sir Mulberry. "Well," said Ralph. The fashionable vagabond for the moment quite quailed under the steady look of the old sinner, and walked toward the door, muttering as he went. "You wanted the Lord, did you?" he said, stopping short when he reached the door, as if a new light had broken in upon him, and confronting Ralph again. "Damn! I was in the way, was I?" Ralph smiled again, but made no answer. "Who brought him to you first?" pursued Sir Mulberry. "And how, without me, could you ever have wound him in your net as you have?" "The net is a large one and rather full," said Ralph. "Take care that it chokes nobody in the meshes." "You would sell your flesh and blood for money yourself if you have not already made a bargain with the devil," retorted the other. "Do you mean to tell me that your pretty niece was not brought here as a decoy for the drunken boy downstairs?" Although this hurried dialogue was carried on in a suppressed tone on both sides, Ralph looked involuntarily round to ascertain that Kate had not moved her position so as to be within hearing. His adversary saw the advantage he had gained and followed it up. "Do you mean to tell me," he asked again, "that it is not so? Do you mean to say that if he had found his way up here instead of me, you wouldn't have been a little more blind, and a little more deaf, and a little less flourishing than you have been? Come, Nickleby, answer me that." "I tell you this," replied Ralph, "that if I brought her here as a matter of business—" "Aye, that's the word," interposed Sir Mulberry with a laugh. "You're coming to yourself again now." "As a matter of business," pursued Ralph, speaking slowly and firmly, as a man who has made up his mind to say no more, "because I thought she might make some impression on the silly youth you have taken in hand and are lending good help to ruin. I knew, knowing him, that it would be long before he outraged her girl's feelings, and unless he offended by mere puppyism and emptiness, he would, with a little management, respect the sex and conduct even of his usurer's niece. But if I thought to draw him on more gently by this device, I did not think of subjecting the girl to the licentiousness and brutality of so old a hand as you. And now we understand each other." "Especially as there was nothing to be got by it, eh?" sneered Sir Mulberry. "Exactly so," said Ralph. He had turned away and looked over his shoulder to make this last reply. The eyes of the two worthies met, with an expression as if each rascal felt there was no disguising himself from the other. and Sir Mulberry Hawk shrugged his shoulders and walked slowly out. His friend closed the door and looked restlessly toward the spot where his niece still remained in the attitude in which he had left her. She had flung herself heavily upon the couch, and with her head drooping over the cushion, and her face hidden in her hands, seemed to be still weeping in an agony of shame and grief. Ralph would have walked into any poverty-stricken debtor's house and pointed him out to a bailiff, though in attendance upon a young child's deathbed, without the smallest concern, because it would have been a matter quite in the ordinary course of business, and the man would have been an offender against his only code of morality. But here was a young girl who had done no wrong save that of coming into the world alive, who had patiently yielded to all his wishes, who had tried hard to please him, above all, who didn't owe him any money, and he felt awkward and nervous. Ralph took a chair at some distance, then another chair a little nearer, then moved a little nearer still, then nearer again, and finally sat himself on the same sofa and laid his hand on Kate's arm. "Hush, my dear," he said, as she drew it back, and her sobs burst out afresh. "Hush, hush, don't mind it now, don't think of it." "Oh, for pity's sake, let me go home," cried Kate. "Let me leave this house and go home." "Yes, yes," said Ralph, "you shall, but you must dry your eyes first, and compose yourself. Let me raise your head. There, there." "Oh, uncle," exclaimed Kate, clasping her hands, "what have I done? What have I done that you should subject me to this? If I had wronged you in thought, or word, or deed, it would have been most cruel to me, and the memory of one you must have loved in some old time, but—" "Only listen to me for a moment," interrupted Ralph, seriously alarmed by the violence of her emotions. "I didn't know it would be so. It was impossible for me to foresee it. I did all I could. Come, let us walk about. You are faint with the closeness of the room and the heat of these lamps. You will be better now if you make the slightest effort." "I'll do anything," replied Kate, "if you will only send me home." "Well, well, I will," said Ralph, "but you must get back your own looks, for those you have will frighten them, and nobody must know of this but you and I. Now let us walk the other way. There, you look better even now." With such encouragements as these, Ralph Nickleby walked to and fro, with his niece leaning on his arm, actually trembling beneath her touch. In the same manner, when he judged it prudent to allow her to depart, he supported her downstairs, after adjusting her shawl and performing such little offices, most probably for the first time in his life. Across the hall and down the steps Ralph led her too, nor did he withdraw his hand until she was seated in the coach. As the door of the vehicle was roughly closed, a comb fell from Kate's hair, close at her uncle's feet, and as he picked it up and returned it into her hand, the light from a neighboring lamp shone upon her face. The lock of hair that had escaped and curled loosely over her brow, the traces of tears yet scarcely dry, the flushed cheek, the look of sorrow, all fired some dormant train of recollection in the old man's breast, and the face of his dead brother seemed present before him, with the very look it bore on some occasion of boyish grief, of which every minutest circumstance flashed upon his mind, with the distinctness of a scene of yesterday. Ralph Nickleby, who was proof against all appeals of blood and kindred, who was steeled against every tale of sorrow and distress, staggered while he looked, and went back into his house as a man who had seen a spirit from some world beyond the grave. All right, and we will close there as we're at the end of 2 hours, and that was the close of chapter 19. We'll pick up again. Let's say 2 weeks. 2 weeks we'll pick this story up again. Because next weekend I will probably do some holiday stories and short stories specific for that. Including, I think, The Snow Queen. So we'll pick up Nicholas Nickleby in 2 weeks. But we will be here next week and there will be a stream. I understand if you guys have holidays or whatever. And if you can't catch it, I hope you have a great and wonderful holiday and a celebration. And if you are able to make it, that would be wonderful too. If not, there will be recordings available that you can listen to whenever you like. If you've enjoyed the stream, please do click that follow button. There's also a YouTube with links below that you can go to for the older content, as well as some pre-recorded content I'll start posting soon. I know a lot of us can't go anywhere for the holidays. Normally I host for my whole family, and the house is going to feel very empty this year. A few years back, I guess it's been more than a few now, my mother used to host the holidays for everybody in the family. And we came over, and the meal was basically a meat tray. I mean, it was slightly more than that, basically a meat tray from a fast food restaurant. And at that point I was like, nope, we're not doing this. I'm taking over. And I took over the holidays from there, and we've had proper holiday feasts ever since. I mean, I don't blame my mother. She's getting on and can't quite manage the effort, because it is a lot of work to host the family. It truly is. And she just wasn't up to it anymore, and that's totally fine. And it gives me a chance to, give my kid the holidays I had as a kid, and the experiences that I'd like her to have. So it's a good thing. But yeah, when it got to that point, I just was like, nope, this shall not stand. In any case, have a wonderful, wonderful holiday week. And if you can make it for the next streams, excellent. If you can't, I will see you when you come back. Click the like and follow and subscribe and all that for the YouTube and the Twitch. Please do join the Discord and come interact with us, or even just pop in to post a book request like Panda did for the Snow Queen. And if you would like to support the stream, there is a Patreon available. I'm doing that instead of Twitch because there won't be any ads ever that way. And it's less expensive for you guys because I priced my subscription tiers lower than Twitch. But actually more money goes to supporting the stream, which is kind of a win-win for everybody. In any case, let's see if we can find somebody to raid, and then we'll close out the stream for the evening. He's still painting the puppy? Okay. Well, let's see if there's anybody else available, and we'll go from there. As I wait 30 seconds with each stream that I look at. There's a clay dragon sculpting. It looks kind of cute. For some reason, there's a live jar of peanut butter. I'm confused. I have no idea what's going on there. You vote the live jar of peanut butter, Villa? That's interesting. The dragon, not the peanut butter. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking sculpting. Let's go with sculpture. So that'll be How Many Dragons. It's a cute name for the stream. Oh, and no ads. Excellent. Right. How many? Hey, rock on. A little nutty. Excellent. Well punned. Well punned, sir. All right, here we go. We are rating How Many Dragons. And away we go.